Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time this afternoon. There's a few faces might have come just for this plenary. For those who've been with us since Thursday night or Friday, you've made it. Well done. It's been an exhilarating 2 days of conference presentations, discussions, and fellowship. My name is Nick Olkovich. I hold the Marie Ann Blondin Chair in Catholic Theology here at St. Mark's College. I'm just one member of a very large and dedicated team of conference organizers, led by my colleague John Martins and the wonderful Fang Fang Chandra. Where is she in the room? There she is. She's done a great job. I know I speak for the entire team when I say that we're grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with us here on campus this weekend. It's your presentations, your questions, insights, and comments that have made this conference, I would say, even though we're not just yet done, a success. I'd like to begin just by acknowledging that the land on which we gather for this, our final plenary, is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. We are blessed to study, work, serve, and pray on this land. It's now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our final keynote speaker, Dr. Stan Chu Ilo. Stan is a Catholic priest from Agu Diocese, Nigeria, and research professor of world Christianity, African studies, and global health at the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. He is also an honorary professor of religion and theology at Durham University in England and visiting research scholar at the Institute of African Studies of the University of Nigeria. He is the coordinating servant of the Pan-African Catholic Theology and Pastoral Network, PACT-PAN. He is the winner of the 2017 Afro Global Award for Global Leadership Impact in recognition of his work as founder of Canadian Samaritans for Africa, a charity that has implemented more than 42 women's empowerment and community support projects in 6 African countries. He is one of the editors and board member of Concilium, very important journal, International Journal of Theology, and serves on the editorial boards of numerous other journals, including the Journal of Global Catholicism and the Journal of African Christian Biography. He currently serves on the senior advisory board of the Templeton Religious Trust Grant Project on Global Spiritual Formation for Religious Leaders. He is the principal convener of the Pan-African Catholic Congress, the 3rd edition of which is taking place this August in Abidjan. He is the author or editor, get this, of 17 books, including the forthcoming Where is God in Africa? A Theology of Suffering and Smiling, Journeying Together in Hope for a Synodal Church in Africa, 2024, Daily Walk with Jesus, African Biblical Reflections, 365 for a Good Christian Life, Someone Beautiful to God, Wealth, Health, and Hope in African Christian Religion, Pentecostalism, Catholicism, and the Spirit in the World, The Handbook of African Catholicism, Ecological Ethics for Cosmic Flourishing, and Under the Palaver Tree, Post-Vatican II African Ecclesiology. He's very clearly an accomplished scholar, servant leader. I'm very proud to call him a friend. We had connected a number of years ago in Toronto. It's great to, he was very much hoping to be here with us this afternoon, but he's had some health concerns that made travel difficult. And we're very happy to have him here. He's pre-recorded the lecture for us. Kevin is going to stream that for us, and then Stan is waiting online in the Zoom room to be present for a live Q&A. So I'm going to say, take it away, Kevin, and, well, Stan. Cheers.
Dear friends in Christ, it gives me great pleasure to address you on this topic of great interest, the promise and praxis of Catholic education, hope for a wounded and divided world. I first express my deepest apologies that I am unable to be with you in person. I've longed to be in Vancouver for the first time, but because of health issues, I cannot be there with you. And I have given also a copy of my text, because what I give to you is a summary of what is in that text, so that we can then have a conversation at the end of this presentation. The question that this paper will answer are, what are the possible contributions of Catholic education to the construction of the praxis of hope for the world? And what does this hope look like in our wounded and broken world? Indeed, what does hope look like in the context of Catholic education? Let us look at our world today. What has emerged in the post-pandemic world is greater violence, wars, nationalism, intolerance, extremism, populism, narrow construction of identity, social hierarchies, and a dysfunctional value system, all of which fuel division, injustice, poverty, and tension among nations and peoples. The prevailing conditions create moral, social, spiritual, and all sorts of injuries for many people everywhere. The nature of our national and global politics and cultural and ideological battles, even within religious institutions, and the contestations for power, and what Pope Francis calls the economies that kill, through protectionism and all forms of extreme version of neoliberal capitalism, have created a fractured world. The disorienting politics of winner takes all, economic protectionism, new forms of imperialism, wars, and structural violence continue to inflict painful existential wounds on so many people, especially minoritized people and those who inhabit the existential peripheries of life. The collective effort to build global ethics and global fraternity and to commit to daily choices by individuals and groups in order to create conditions for human and cosmic flourishing and for promoting the common good seems to have not found an echo in many hearts. It seems that people cannot find solace by leaning on many of the institutions around which our common life is built, like religious institutions, the state, or international organizations. We live in a pain-filled world that is in dire need of solace and hope. In the face of all these challenges, what I see around me is a very deep hunger in the world today, the hunger for hope and healing, the hunger for recognition and love, the hunger for community, the hunger to hold on to something or someone that is true and that will not fail people, manipulate, abuse, or exploit them when many things around them show signs of instability. There is a cloud of fear about the future that I see, and this is not helped by mistrust and tension in contemporary politics through the politics of exclusion, white supremacy, fueled by the idolatry of money, religion, nationalism, and the lamentation of so many people at the existential peripheries in our communities and in our nations. The Catholic Church, particularly at this time that we are in this process of electing a pope and grieving the loss of one of the most consequential popes of our times, Pope Francis, there is a search for the future of the church, whether to continue with the reform of Pope Francis or to retreat to a restorationist church with the intensification of the masculinization of the sanctuary and ecclesial leadership that will impose more pain and lamentation on women and minorities. The question then is, can Catholic education, that is the product of diverse traditions of over 2,000 years, that have mediated to cultures and peoples diverse ways of knowing and encountering love and otherness through the emptying of the self, mediate hope today? In its 2014 document, Educating Today and Tomorrow, the then Congregation on Catholic Education, after exploring contemporary culture, concluded that there is an educational emergency, which means for the dicastery that Catholic education is confronting many difficulties today in establishing educational relations which in order to be genuine, should convey vital values and principles to younger generations, not only to help individual growth and maturation, but also to contribute to building the common good. Catholic education is challenged today to form individuals, cultures, and societies, as well as churches, that reject all forms of idols, that block the human and communal gaze within the imprisoning walls of the self, the group, religion, race, nation, and other forms of social hierarchies and economies of scale that cause so much suffering, lamentation, and despair in the world. So how can we recover as people of faith, or rather reinvent the promise of Catholic education, which is tied to the missionary mandate of the Lord when he said, "Go out to the nation, to all the nations, and proclaim the good news"? Or the programmatic logion that we find at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke: "The Spirit of the Lord has been given to me, for he has sent me to preach the good news to the poor, freedom to those held in captivity, sight to the blind, and to announce that the acceptable year of the Lord has come." To put it in another form, as Educating Today and Tomorrow proposes, how can Catholic education in schools and universities scattered all over the world provide remarkable support to ecclesial communities that are engaged in the new evangelization, and then contribute to fostering anthropological and ethical values in individual consciences and cultures, which are necessary in order to build a society that is based on fraternity and solidarity? My presentation is divided into three brief parts. First, I will discuss the changing contexts and contestations within Catholic education, especially focusing on the issue of the identity of Catholic educational system and the changing identity of students being educated in Catholic schools. Second, I will unpack what I consider the conceptual and theoretical frameworks at play in these contestations and what Catholic educators are called to be and to do. Finally, I will share some stories of hope and the praxis that I think can be implemented and is being implemented in Catholic education, and leave you with some challenges and some hopeful narratives, so that each and every one of us can seriously consider how we can embrace those practices that will sow the seed of hope, after the example of Pope Francis, who invited us especially to journey together as pilgrims of hope in this Jubilee year. For the sake of this address, I use the term Catholic education to apply to all kinds of education through the agency of the Catholic Church or religious communities and associations that carry out Catholic education. When it applies to post-secondary education, I will use the term Catholic higher education. In this sense, particularly, I will focus on Catholic universities, which are centers where cultures and faith intersect. They are centers where there is a healthy and wholesome dialogue within the community of faith, the community of the academy, and the wider community in the search for truth and in meeting the pressing challenges dominant within the intellectual, religious, political, or scientific community. Catholic universities also offer the freedom animated by the Holy Spirit to seek and pursue truth to the very roots, and to understand the movement of the Spirit within diverse cultural and intellectual histories. At the end of his study of Catholic education in Africa, Canadian development expert Robert Calderisi draws this very important conclusion, and I quote, "For the continent as a whole, the Church's greatest contribution remains an educational system that has survived the political and economic turmoil of the last 50 years and still offers skills and hope to millions of Africans." We can say this of many other continents. The Catholic Church is an expert in education. One cannot conceive of the traditions of education in the world today without acknowledging the indispensable role which the Catholic Church has played in its emergence. In Africa, for instance, where I have the data from UNESCO, 30% of students in most Catholic elementary and secondary schools, as well as in universities surveyed in Africa, are non-Catholics, Protestants, and Muslims. As John Elias and Lucinda Nolan propose, Catholic educational tradition is both rich and varied. It is a living tradition which continues not only as a body of work, but as a way of doing things that is the outcome of centuries of experience, prayer, action, and critical reflection. Included in this tradition are works of history, theology, sciences, architecture, literary oeuvre, and the social and medical sciences. Also included are works on astronomy, drama, the rich treasure of human intellection and creativity, stored in many Catholic libraries, archives, and museums. The idea of a formalized education in the West was started by the Catholic Church. And I don't want to bog you with the history, which you can read when you get my text. But I propose that Catholic education is the process through which people are socialized into the Catholic intellectual heritage in its diverse representations in both universal and local contexts of Catholicism and in the world. And this intellectual heritage is a vast repository of thought that is made up of more than 2,000 years of engagement with reality, whether it is with drama, styles of architecture, jurisprudential principles, social and political thoughts, you name them, or even AI. This heritage has evolved. It is content of belief, the logic of belief, the rationality of faith, faith and reason, human nature, and conditions of human and cosmic flourishing. It deals with ultimate questions about life and death, cultures and traditions, morality, virtue, ethics, contested questions about life and social existence, justice and order, human suffering. Catholic education is universal in its engagement with the reality that we all find around us, so that you know who you are and who the other person is and the world of nature. So I think Catholic education, in my own definition, means openness to the splendor of truth and culture. It means embracing and appreciating the sublimity of the human intellect in its search for meaning, wisdom, and the essence and destiny of all things. Catholic education also means a genuine recognition and discovery of the intrinsic goodness and dignity of every human being and of the whole world of nature. Catholic education opens itself to the grace of caritas, the priority of community over individualism, the joyful embrace of the beauty of shared experience, solidarity with the poor and the weak, and the splendor and freedom of belonging to a community of learners, where everyone is a firstborn child of God. One definition of Catholic education that has stayed with me was the one I got in 2015 during my field research in one of the Catholic secondary schools in Ontario, where I asked a student who self-identified as belonging to the LGBTQ plus community what she understands as the goal of Catholic education, and if she thought that the ongoing debate then on accepting schools bill should require separate schools, that is Catholic schools as they are called in Ontario, to create a GSA club and a room for GSA members. She said, and I quote, "I don't think we LGBTQ members or community need a separate space for separate communities. It is the Catholic school environment that matters to me. Education is not simply the curriculum or the policy or a room, but the inclusive school environment created for and by everyone in the school." To use the expression of Parker Palmer, Catholic education links people to the grace of greater things, which hold us together as God's people under the reign of a loving God. It immerses students into a world that is bigger than themselves. It helps them to weave connection between their lives and other lives and the entire reality that is a mystery as well as a beauty to behold and to embrace. It is an invitation to humility in order to ponder beauty and embrace the wisdom of God in the grandeur of created reality. Catholic education immerses students in the bosom of Trinitarian love and sets them on the path of building relationships and connections with all people and all creatures in the search for meaning and the truth of all things. It introduces them into a life of ongoing conversion and conversations through the dynamic movement from one level of meaning to another and the discernment required in making authentic transitions in their journey within cultures and histories towards realizing the purpose of personal and group existence here on earth and beyond. This kind of education is very comprehensive in nature. It is both a promise and a praxis. It is a promise because Catholic education is presented in the church and in the church's document and in the mission statements of schools, school boards, and universities as a set of goals or graduate expectations which students will acquire upon graduation. Catholic education is the promise which the church makes to her members and to the world that those who receive Catholic education receive, I think, 5 broad goals: learning to read, learning to dialogue, learning to love, learning to live together, and learning to die. I agree with Pierre Hadot in his book Philosophy as a Way of Life that classical education offered Christian education a conceptual framework for developing the goal of education as a spiritual exercise through which the community leads those who go through Christian education to pursue happiness, acquire virtues, and minimize their vices so as to find human fulfillment and the ultimate purpose of the moral demand, and thus realize their unique vocation. Education is a process of acquiring the discipline of focusing on what really matters, the freedom of letting go of one's prejudices and abandoning the pursuit of vain goals. The classical explanation of human fulfillment vis-a-vis the need for education is that, according to Hadot, people are unhappy because they are the slave of their passions. In other words, they are unhappy because they desire things they may not be able to obtain, since they are exterior, alien, and superfluous to them. It follows that happiness consists of independence, freedom, and autonomy. In other words, happiness is the return to the essential, that which is truly ourselves and which depends on us. All spiritual exercises were attempts to return the self to the true self. The self is liberated from the state of alienation into which it has been plunged by worries, passions, desires, and sinfulness. Thus, freed, the soul becomes a true moral person, open to universality and objectivity, and participating in universal nature or thought. Spiritual exercises are aimed at making the student transform himself or herself and attain a state of perfection. It is a kind of self-formation or paideia, which is to teach us to live, not in conformity with the passions or our human prejudices or merely social conventions, because social life is itself a product of the passion, but challenges us to live in conformity with the nature of the human person and the ordination of the human person to ultimate fulfillment. And this leads me naturally in this consideration to the question of vocation, which I believe is the promise of Catholic education to accompany students to find the purpose of their lives. It's not just about techne, what you do or skills, but it is very totalistic in nature. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Parker Palmer emphasizes strongly the need for individuals to find the purpose of their lives, and that the search for life's goals is not a solipsistic search. Your life goal does not default to individualistic pursuit of selfish ends. In finding your life's goal, you find your connection with others and the world of nature and with God. The purpose of your life is often what people refer to as a vocation. However, a vocation is not simply a call that you receive, it is a life that you live. A vocation is not simply a call that comes from outside of you, it is a deep desire planted in the very depths of your being that drives everything that you do. The dynamic energy that drives your daily actions and the choices that you make. The purpose of life is as close to you as your fingerprint. It is your pulse, your heartbeat, and the goal to which your life is oriented. Your vocation is your life's mission and the compass that should channel all your energy to their proper end. In my native language, it's called akaraka, that's your fingerprint. More or less the gift that God has given you. When you use these treasures and pay attention to that deep well of meaning that gives you existence a narrative, you will attain a distinctive life quality and identity as the plot of your life as it unfolds in the direction of ultimate human fulfillment and the realization of your life mission here on earth. So your vocation is that treasure of inestimable value that you ought to find every day and embrace with all your energy and everything that God has given you. And this is where education plays a major part. Indeed, an irreplaceable part of education is to help people to discover themselves, their vocation, and the purpose of their lives as they pay attention to the voice of the Lord, of God that calls from within. St. Augustine writes about the closeness of God to each and every one of us. God is more intimately present to you than your own heart. Augustine captures this call this way: you, God, called and cried out loud, vocasti et clamasti, and shattered my deafness. You were radiant and resplendent. You put to flight my blindness. You were fragrant, and I drew in my breath, and now pant after you. I tasted you, and I feel both hunger and thirst for you. You touched me, and I'm set on fire to attain the peace which is yours. This is why Augustine, in both De Magistro as well as in the Doctrina Christiana, says that no one should call himself or herself a teacher. Because following the biblical text, we have all one master. And in his school, all of us are students. The task of the teacher, parents, pastors, priests, friends, and the entire community is to accompany and support students to discover their vocations in life and to develop the disciplines, spiritual, ethical, moral, and technical to live this vocation in the presence and with others. Now, we look at the contestations in Catholic education, because the praxis is about how we go about realizing the promise of Catholic education. The Catholic school or university does exactly what the church does, accompanying people in their life's journey to find their true vocation. As John Zizulas so perceptively notes, extra ecclesiam nulla salus is still valid today, not in the sense in which it was interpreted before Vatican II. Rather, Zizulas invites theologians and churches to consider the community of faith summoned for mission as an authentic saving reality when it offers itself as an inclusive community and a locus where people move from self-love to love of others. In this sense, the church is a site for genuine relationships that can heal people and where the means of salvation are not reduced to sound bites, things, rituals, and objects, but to an embrace of the interpenetration of persons in this sphere saturated by love and grace. The church as the locus of interpenetration of persons is where the Trinitarian drama and mystery of love is present in the Eucharist, in the cross, the resurrection, the surprising prophetic works of the Spirit when we witness to the presence of God through our resistance to the forces of evil. I want to propose that the kind of ecclesial community where lives of people interpenetrate in love is like the healing inn in the parable of the Good Samaritan, where people can find solace in their pain. In such a community of faith, there is a crystallization and saturation of love, enfleshed and mediated through daily witnesses in acts of solidarity, support, and other affirming advocacy and resistance to the forces of evil and death. Now, we must pay attention to how the world works. And I like to say that one of the most challenging encounters I had when I was doing my research for my second PhD on sociology of education was when I met a woman at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. I met her in the elevator and I was carrying all these books on equity and diversity. And she looked at me and said, "Are you a priest?" I said, "Yes." I said, He said, "What are you doing with these books on equity? You priests and Catholics, you don't do equity." And she walked away with so much anger. Now, I felt very sad that she didn't hang around with me so I could have shared with her how we do equity. My concern, the rest of this paper, is can we prove such people wrong who say, Catholic Church, you don't do equity? Can we prove to people who have all kinds of negative experience with Catholic education or even the Catholic Church that there is something better, that the promise is still valid? For me, the story of Catholic education can best be told through the lens of frontline teachers and administrators, teachers like my parents, both of whom were principals, who sacrificed so much for me, my siblings, and so many students in more than 7 different schools. Sisters like Rosemary Nyirumbe, whom I met at St. Monica's Girls' School in Gulu, Uganda, who devote her entire life to sewing back the broken pieces of lives of thousands of girls who were forced into marriage, who were raped, who suffered physical and emotional violence in the hands of the rebels of the Lost Resistance Army, teachers in Gaza who are being bombed to death in their schools. They are struggling every day to educate their kids amidst blood and destruction. And gentle heroes like Friar Peter Tabaki, the 2019 winner of the Global Teacher Award, who sold everything he had to educate poor kids in rural Kenyan communities. But we also must look at education, as always, through the struggles and expectations of our students, their joys and sorrows. As always, the symbol for us is the Holy Trinity. Now, without going into all the details here, I think that there are two contending tendencies within Catholic education everywhere. Is the consensus approach that emphasizes sameness, universality of human experience, of human nature, a common curriculum without paying attention to the hidden curriculum and the power dynamics that play in asymmetrical epistemological frames and asymmetrical power relation. And the interrogative critical approach that says, yes, consensus matter, but we must become more critical of our positionality, our locus of enunciation, and how education has done some harm to some people and continues to do in the consensus approach. That is what I find that challenges us today in order to realize the promise of Catholic education, to do what Gerard Grace, the editor of the International Journal of Catholic Education, calls roots, deep roots with branches approach. We are the foundation, but then paying attention to evidence, the evidence that we find that you can harvest from paying attention to the stories of people. So we must become aware of this tension within Catholic education, because evidence-based research can help to challenge the church and Christians on some of the assumptions and models we have adopted about Catholic identity, the distinctiveness of Catholic education, even the narratives that we have of people. Second, such evidence may topple some of the current political and public debate about faith-based schooling, which are based on prejudice about the faith or even about the Catholic Church, and generalize assertions and counter-assertions which have been built over time, devoid of any deep research or empirical evidence. There is also the need that we develop theoretical frameworks and research paradigms that can enrich Catholic education in multiple settings. With the growing importance of faith-based schooling systems internationally, Grace argues there is an obvious need for more systematic research and inquiry. Now, it is very important to think about hope within the Catholic educational system, because both the interrogative critical approach and the consensus approach represent two approaches to Catholic education that you find. The question is, whatever approach you are adopting, for those who are entrenched in consensus, thinking that cultural differentiation in our world today is a threat to the survival of faith-based or religiously inspired education, it's very important to engage in the debate with an open mind. But I think that rather than talk about hope, that I like to conclude my presentation with a few stories of hope and then draw some conclusion. One is that many of us Canadians know about Me to We. It was started by Craig and Mark Kilberger before, and it really was one of the greatest social movements, youth-led social movements that I know in Canada, until it was overwhelmed by some of these issues about accountability and all that. But that movement, more than 1 million people, started with a teacher, Ellen McAdam, who was the best friend of Craig and Mark's mother, and taught them English when they were struggling. Ellen taught English as first language, and Craig and Mark's mother wanted her to help her her two boys. And while she was doing that, she began to impart into them this idea of a universal approach or Catholic approach to looking at life, especially the people who are suffering, these migrants who are coming in then from Europe. And then that seed planted was what fueled the desire of these kids to form Me to We, the we structure. Life is not about me, it's about us. We think of another example that I had mentioned of Sister Rosemary, who spent her life rescuing more than 4,000 girls and teaching them just to tailoring as they were being pulled out, run out from the bush, from rebels who had violated them. She provided a sanctuary for them in Gulu, where they learn skills, where they are healed of the trauma that they have suffered. They are given hope. She appropriately called what she was doing sowing hope with a needle, bringing together the broken pieces of people's lives. through St. Monica's Catholic School in Gulu. Thus, you see that Catholic education is a locus revelationis. It is a place of revelation for something bigger, something better. So first, we must build a community. In 1989, the report commissioned by the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association to determine how Catholics perceive the province, and participants were asked, what is the first word that came to mind in relation to Catholic schools? And they said, Catholics and non-Catholics, community. So it's about building a community, and sometimes it's actually reimagined community for so many people who are wounded out there in the world. I'd like to conclude with the story that moved so many people when it happened in Chile, the Camp of Hope in Chile, when a mine collapsed. And these 35 miners were lost in that cave until they were discovered, and then close to 4 weeks of rescue happened. When Louis Uzor, the shift supervisor, came out, he was the last to come out. He organized the miners in there, made sure that people were cared for, encouraged people, and he stayed back and waited until the last person came. The whole world united to help these miners. Their relatives never gave up on them. Even when people thought they all were perished, they gathered every day. That's hope. That's the kind of leadership that I call the transformative faith-based educational leadership, TF Bell. The kind of teacher, the kind of educator, the kind of administrator who eats last, who will work like Louis to make sure that your teachers do not die, your students do not die. It doesn't mean physical death, emotional death can happen, death of dreams, spiritual death. So I invite you to the Camp of Hope. That is what Catholic education should be. These miners were in darkness, but they found light from above, from family members who never gave up on them. I remember the encounter I had with a prisoner, an ex-convict, in the ministry that I participate in Chicago, in the Kobe House. And this man, the first year after he came out, because of the people, Christians who were coming to be with him, support him while he was in jail, he decided in solidarity to carry the cross. He didn't know that the cross was such a heavy thing, the Good Friday parade. And this was so heavy, he said, and he wanted to give up. He said, I will not give up on this cross because these, my friends, never gave up on me. For 7 years, I was in jail. That's hope. Hope is not simply what we say, it's what we do. Hope is not simply what we expect. It is the actions that we do. It is an utopia, but it's not built on emptiness. It's built on a person, on Jesus Christ. And it's built on the kind of story that emerge from our Catholic communities. I have a lot I would like to share with you, but we can share that when we have the Q&A. For now, I think that Pope Francis has given us a great model of what hope looks like. It is a culture of encounter. It is the church as a field hospital. It is a revolution of tenderness. Like he said to young people in Lisbon in 2023, it is a world meant for all of us. So let us go out and create in our schools a space where all of us, like Pope Francis said, all of us can feel the beauty, the strength, and grace of being one children of God, beautiful to God. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the video, Stan. That was an incredibly powerful talk. I'm glad that we have you here live now to maybe do a little bit of a Q&A. I think you had said that you might have a few remarks you wanted to add live. Would you like to start with that?
Yes, it's just a note of gratitude to you, Nick, my dear friend, and to John Martin, and to all my brothers and sisters. How I wish to be in Vancouver, but unfortunately, I came back from Accra, and my problem with tinnitus got worse. But by God's grace, things will get better. And I just wanted to highlight what a privilege it has been for me to have worked with Pope Francis, to have done the project that I did for 3 years in the dicastery for promoting integral human development. So during the synodal process, there are 5 of us regional coordinators. I was coordinating Canada, US, and Mexico. We were asked by the Pope to go and meet people at the existential peripheries. Outside of the normal formal synod, the Pope said he wanted to hear from those whose voices are not being heard. Prisoners. That's how I met Andrew, whose story I told of carrying the cross. Because I went to the prisons. I went to the border. I was embedded with migrants on the border of the US and Mexico at El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. I spent time with LGBTQ communities and spent time with people in nursing homes, because the Pope had received so many reports by Catholics after COVID who were very wounded. So he really said something that I wish to kind of bring together. By going to all these places, it really was more important to me, more transformational for me than all the studies I have done. This culture of encounter, that when you stand in the presence of another, like Pope Francis says, you're standing on holy ground. And when we brought back our report in 2022, that report was what made the Pope to add 1 more year to the synodal process. If you notice, the synod was meant to have lasted 1 year. But when we brought this report from all the regions, huge, massive data about the cries of people, the Pope said we need to give 1 more year. And the man who really helped this to happen was Cardinal Prevost, who is now the prefect of the dicastery for bishop. He was then a bishop in Peru. So he saw the report. And I remember that meeting, what Pope Francis said. He was very tired, but he said 3 things, which I really want to share, because we are mourning the Pope and praying for the cardinals. The Pope said 3 things to us. Sempre avanti, that is, keep moving forward. Coraggio, be courageous. Tutto bene, everything, all will be well. All will be well. Yeah, we don't know how the future will unfold, but he said, keep moving, keep moving. Don't lose hope, because the darkness sometimes around us could make us lose hope. But I believe that Catholic education is a place where every student should hear that word. I am not strong today. Say, keep moving. Courageous. All will be well. All will be well, not just as a wish, but because I am standing with you. I think also the church should hear that even now, because so many people are afraid what is going to happen. Some want a restorationist agenda, some want a retreat, but I think that the synodal document actually offers us, the vademecum. So when people say the cardinals are listening, the people of God has already spoken. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you for your consideration to allow me into this space in this way. And I hope that will not prevent you, John or Nick, from inviting me next time, because I would like to make it up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. And folks can go to that website, right? So Doing Theology at the Existential Peripheries, the reports have been published on the website. And so folks are interested in some of what came out of those, the encounters that you and your colleagues have had across the globe. That's on the website for Integral Development, I believe, is it not?
Yes, I can send you the link.
Yes. So, and I've used some of that in one of my classes. It's an excellent sort of selection of pieces that came out of that process. If you're all right, Stan, to stick around for a couple questions, I'm going to just look around the room. If anybody's got a comment or a question, it's kind of hard to follow that. That was a tour de force. This is at the end of two days, Stan. So, yeah. Comments, questions from anyone? If you can put it in the chat, I can share it with you either way at the end.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that talk. When you started talking about me to we, it reminded me of a story of a friend of mine who was a priest in Toronto, and many years ago when me to we was a big thing, they were at their height, and they were holding huge rallies at big arenas in Toronto, and this priest was invited to speak to the group, and he had been working with social justice for a long time. And at that time, it was just becoming known the problems with these special minerals that were being mined in Africa and how they were being used in phones. And he had put together a presentation for these young people about their participation in the exploitation and the injustices by being part of this purchasing of the phones and maybe unnecessary purchasing of the phones and all of that kind of stuff. And he was told point blank, you cannot say that. This gathering is not about, structural issues of social justice. It's about making these kids feel empowered. And it really makes me wonder about the focus that we sometimes have about where hope comes from, and the stories that we tell about these little pockets of hope. But what is happening? What is not being allowed to be told? And the last link I'll make is, I remember listening to David Suzuki talk about how he regrets so much of the work that he did, because he said so much of the first work that we did was on saving little pockets of trees. And he said, while we were preoccupied with these victories, this huge monster of an economy that is now captive to fossil fuels and a few other things that are almost impossible to overcome now, we were letting that grow. We weren't noticing it grow. And so I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on that idea of hope and how it's seen as a downer to talk about these structural issues. But from your perspective of, crossing the water between Africa and North America, and maybe you have some insights about how Catholic education can help us move forward, help us be courageous, help all be well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your observation. I think that you do raise an important point which all of us must confront. One is that hope is always a little reality. I mean, the littleness of what is emerging. And these are baby steps. And it requires a lot of patience. There's transformational hope for sure. That is hope that changes everything structurally. So on one hand, like what you point out, thinking about Congo, the cobalt that, is generating so much war. I mean, 2 months ago, the Archbishop of Kivu, who is, part of our network, in Pan-African Catholic Theology Network that I serve as the coordinating servant. He sent me this painful message. In February, the rebels, M23, had bombed the maternity ward in the Catholic hospital and the Catholic school Catholic hospital, killing all the newly born babies. And he said, how can this be? These rebels, they are John, Peter, Paul, and he was so heartbroken. Heartbroken because we have seen this before. We've watched this movie before. So you are asking a fundamental question, which I addressed in my forthcoming book, which is the challenge between what you might call quick resurrection. You know, Jesus stayed in the tomb for 3 days. So some people want this quick resurrection. You know, thinking about me to we, when I met Craig and Mark in 2008 in Peterborough, they were filled with idealism. But that also tells us, if you worked in international development or humanitarian work, as I have the last 25 years or so, what shocks you is how good intentions actually reinforce existing patterns of behavior that create a cycle of decay. That is, that a lot of corruption takes place in international development. A lot of it. It shocks you, but then it energizes you to do something different. So to your question, how do you keep moving in Catholic education, is that I think hope emerges from stories of a different world, some kind of an alternate reality, an imagination of something different that people can look at. That's what Pope Francis said consistently. The church today is not called to proselytize, to condemn people, but to be a church of attraction, where people are attracted to something beautiful, to do something beautiful with their life, because they see in this story the footprints of God. And then we can leave our own fingerprints as we do this. So we cannot allow the bad things that happen, the failures, to overwhelm us. I know how I worked so hard with Greg Rogers, who was the spiritual. We actually in the high school have the Craig and Mark to have this sprint. But then when this problem began to develop, and we were just on the cusp of trying, because I had identified this problem and had advised, it's turning into some other thing, mega business. So it's a challenge, but you can begin where you are to say, I can be a sower of hope. And that's how you seed hope, incarnate hope, through small acts of kindness and resistance, because we need resistance in today's world with so much happening around us, especially from the United States. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Really good question. Good comment. Anybody else?
Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate that comment. I'm Israel Diaz. It seems to me, as I'm hearing your response and empowerment, Walter Brueggemann's idea of prophetic imagination comes to mind, of how we can identify the oppression but then see the reality differently. And so to what extent can our different academic disciplines in Christian institutions, whether higher education, secondary, etc., sort of promote this empowerment for students to see and envision, right? Maybe consider alternatives of project-based learning or other types of assessments that can help them construct or reconstruct realities for the local communities that eventually can create transformation for the broader global context. Do you think that's something that is possible or feasible that could empower Christian education?
Yes, I think so, because I think the students actually, they're looking for something concrete. A lot of our disciplines, and I would say, first of all, in order to do this, there should be greater interdisciplinary engagement. Our studies are sometimes very siloed. And I think also for Catholic social teaching, or like Catholic theology, indeed Catholic evangelization, when I compare that with my studies as well of the Pentecostals, particularly in the continent of Africa, or the global study we did to look at Pentecostalism in Latin America and in Asia, you see that Pentecostalism, so when people say Christianity or Catholicism is growing in Africa, in the global south, I can tell you that in my home country, Nigeria, that the Catholic Church is losing members to Pentecostals. So people don't factor that. But what I want to draw from here, just to respond to your question, is that it seems to me that the Pentecostals, they do, you know, but the Catholic Church, we teach, we have documents upon documents upon documents, and these accumulation of documents overwhelm, because there's no, like, you look at the synods that we have had under Pope Francis, with due respect, we have had many synods. So how are we implementing the synod on the Amazon? How are we implementing the synod on the family? How are we implementing the synod on synodality? So, but you just think that once you have taught correctly, metaphysically, that it's done. And then it makes this siloed approach that people are not building up on what other people have done. So I think three things to answer your question. One is to look at best practices. And you find it not just in your own discipline, but you can find it elsewhere. What has worked? And secondly is to anchor any project on the agency of your students and the agency of the people that you are going to serve. Because like Pope Francis said in his address to the United Nations in 2015, that poor people everywhere must become protagonists in their own history. When I organized in 2022 a meeting between Pope Francis and 1,000 African students from 9 Catholic universities in Africa, Pope Francis said, you have to fight for yourself. You cannot be passive or reactionary. You must become protagonists. He used the same word again. Even some people were saying, was he calling the students, calling them to arms or something like that? So you must look at best practices, and you find it everywhere. Then case studies, they focus on specific cases so that you can address particular cases and then use your experience of doing that to move to another. Sometimes, you know, with regard to Africa, people are not really focused on one thing, or just the problem we have in Canada, the big challenge the Catholic Church faces with First Nations, you know, after all the painful realities. And I put this in my text of, you know, residential school. I know that many years ago, one of the greatest shocks I had was the crisis in a place called Atawabiskat. You know, that many people were dying from poor sanitary conditions, living in squalor in Canada. Maybe those are case studies that sometimes can bring home to people the reality, and then look for problem solving. Education should help people to solve problems, not create problems for people. So I think those, and then that interdisciplinary approach can help to drive the change agency that is always required. And then the other thing is change management, because like going back to me to we is how you manage the changes so that you're not replacing one problem with even more complex problems, and then making it impossible actually to make incremental growth in advancing the reign of God.
Really good, Stan. Really good question, Israel. We do probably have time for one comment or a question. I think we certainly have time, right? Yeah. I'm going to just look at my watch here. Do you have one? Anybody else? Graham, I'm coming to you. I have one myself, but I don't. I know Stan.
This was a wonderful talk, and thank you. It's very good to hear this perspective and to hear the hope that comes through it. I'm aware of another trend in Catholic education scholarship, and it's the one of, if you've read Graham Rossiter from Australia, and he speaks about how too many expectations get heaped onto Catholic schools, that they're being asked to do too much, and it takes away from the mission of providing an education, and they're being asked to do the work of like the parish and take on the problems of the parish, and the school. The school is being asked to take on the problems of the parish basically, and to like restore credibility to a parish church when that's really the parish church's job. And there's another complementary view from England from an author named Sean Whittle, and he's arguing actually for the deconfessionalization of Catholic education, and I believe on kind of the same grounds, that there's been too much being asked to promote formation of students when that can be done in the parish as well. So what gets lost there then is the spirit that animates the teachers and the school to provide education as an educational service to people, much like a Catholic hospital might provide service, or a Catholic soup kitchen or homeless shelter might provide service to people, but without expecting them to become somebody else. It's to provide service so that they can be their own persons. They can then they can decide for themselves. But could you comment then on how this message you're bringing today meets with this perspective that maybe Catholic schools are doing enough by providing a service, and they're very well subscribed. We know that people are not going to the parish, but they're really coming strongly to the schools. Thank you for receiving this.
Reverend Stan Chu Ilo, who is back.
Thank you. I don't know. I lost internet connectivity.
So Stan, I don't know if you heard any of that.
Yes, I heard about that too much is being dumped on the on Catholic schools. That's the last I heard, and I think
that's the gist of it. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you in this perspective. I think from my experience living and working in North America, and also living and working sometimes in Europe, especially in Italy, where I do some pastoral work in the summer, I think that we cannot practice this siloed evangelization. So teachers and schools, they have to do this, everything, sacramental preparation. They always say the triad of school, parish, and parent. I think it still makes sense. I worry that, and I want people to understand me, that just too much is being asked of priests and bishops as well. We need to empower our laity, empower our women. This is part of the problem. What creates the silos is then that, I mean, a person, so a teacher in a Catholic school who is a female can as well be a minister in the church. If it's a diaconate, a preacher, we need to expand the possibilities within the church. The Catholic Church has so much talent, but I mean, I just want to stir the pot a bit that the election of the next pope, no single woman has a say. It's not a healthy institution. And we have to, Pope Francis saw tomorrow and wanted to move the church from clericalism, episcopalism, to the church of all, like he said to the kids in Lisbon. Todos, all of us. So I think that the problem is this siloed thinking that there's no interpenetration of talents and skills. And then the teacher is mind your business, MYOB, in the school. Then the pastor is minding his own business in the parish. But there should be a diffusion, a diffused leadership. And the other point is that I don't think that the church globally has grasped seriously the cultural crisis and the huge change that is coming in the world. This is like some talk even of a post-human universe, like we're dealing with our students here, they answer questions with AI. You know, we must reimagine the future, not with old paradigms. So I don't know many of you who are in the theology, if you read Pope Francis' document on renewal of Catholic theology, Ad Theologiam Promovendam, he calls for a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift, because that's how we get out of this siloed thinking. But in terms of deconfessionalization, that is a critical point. The Catholic Church must maintain, to a large extent, her capacity to transmit this heritage, the Catholic intellectual tradition, but it's not confessional. I don't think Catholic education is confessional in a bad way. I think it is when you absolutize that confession and fail to allow intercultural, interreligious, and interdenominational perspective to filter into that, then it becomes like the Catholic education can be your prison or your palace. So it's a palace where you feel comfortable, you know your stuff, you know the catechism, you know the palace, but it can also become a palace where you're locked in your own world in a single narrative without like a lesbian monad without doors and windows. So I think we have to reimagine the baptismal priesthood, the ministerial priesthood, so that it can actually begin to help us to use so many talents we have in the church. Why if only few people are doing things and they are overwhelmed? Priests are overwhelmed. There are closing parishes here in Chicago. When I was doing the work for the Holy See in St. Louis, there are closing parishes. Everywhere I went, in New York, there are closing parishes. And they come with all these fancy terms, like in Toronto, it was family of faith. But it's really that MBAs are getting jobs in the church. MDs are losing their jobs. So anyway, I think you guys have had a long day. I don't want to go further, but I agree with you. We need to think critically about how to expand the horizon of participation in the church so that things are not being dumped on one, the school, and then the priests are getting overwhelmed, the bishop. I mean, how easy is it to see a bishop today? It's like like very bureaucratic. So it's quite a challenge. We have to kind of reimagine this together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stan. Thanks so much, brother. Again, we're sorry that you couldn't be here with us today. We're going to circulate your remarks, and me and John are going to follow up and send you a nice thank you note. And
thank you very much. Thank you so much. Love to all of you. I'm really so glad, privileged to be here. Thank you.
God bless, Stan. Thanks so much.
God bless you. God bless. Thank you.
And you are coming to Vancouver soon when you feel better. You're coming.
Thank you.
So I want to go back and just thank all of our presenters, all of our attendees who bring their gifts and talents and research and questions and allow us to move forward with hope. I had that written in my notes because I think that we got that from Dr. Stan Chu Ilo because I think that's part of how he operates, right? And he really reflects Francis's papacy. And the Center for Christian Engagement was founded on the basis of that hope. And he talked about the ecumenical aspect of this, the Catholic aspect, the interfaith. We saw all of that here. Questions regarding AI we saw come up. We need to face all of this, our future, with a great hope, which he mentioned, this great line that Stan Chu Ilo, sewing hope with a needle, bringing together the broken pieces of people's lives. And those of us who are teachers and educators sometimes get lost in just the broken pieces, but we're allowing and helping people to sew them together themselves as well. And that culture of encounter is so important. I want to thank our donors who allow this kind of work to take place. And Mark and Barbara are here, our platinum sponsors. There are hardly sponsors like them who are here the whole time. You probably saw them in some of your sessions, they heard your papers. So this is not simply about offering sort of a financial support, but about sharing in our work. It's remarkable. And also the donors to our center, Peter Bull, Angus Reed, and Andy Zox, who allowed this center to be established. Maria Blondin Chair, Nikolkovich, and the Sisters of St. Anne who endowed that, who care so much for this work and are continuing it. City in Focus and Tom Cooper, I'm not sure if Tom is here right now, but we're so thankful for his support and his constant support. I want to thank the incredible volunteers of our wonderful colleges who came together to make this conference a reality. You probably saw Victoria and Jared from the Development Office, but also Olha and Kiara, who am I forgetting? Mercedes was here as well today. People come back to help, and it's really wonderful. I also want to thank, of course, the incredible tech team of Kevin Egg, who has to deal with this. And Benny Yu, who has made sure all the rooms operated extremely well. I was really thankful for that, and for him coming in on a Saturday. And all of the work that you do see is nothing as to what goes on behind the scenes with these folks and all the work they do in advance. Also need to thank the CCE Advisory Committee for all of their planning work in bringing this conference to you, especially the organizing committee, Linda Robitaille, Father Nick Meisel, Nick Olkovich, and Fang Chandra. This conference doesn't take place without their work. Father Nick and Nick Olkovich, for instance, make an incredible Costco run. The reason we have so much food for you at breakfast and at breaks is because of their willingness to go to Costco, fill one car. It's a lot of food, and it's wonderful. And of course, I want to single out Fang Chandra, who's here. Oh, I need you to come up here. Well,
I'm more behind the people.
yeah, she made it happen. How about that? How about that? She made it happen. Now you can go, I guess, because there's probably more work to do, I would suspect. So we're thankful, and this is part of that culture of encounter, though, too. Fang Fang is a student at Vancouver School of Theology. She comes to us from Indonesia. She makes this culture of encounter happen, right? One sign of that culture of encounter and engagement. So just wonderful. Also want to thank Jerry Turcott, who I'm going to call up here now, president and principal of, I forget which one, St. Mark's and Corpus Christi. But he does both of them. Because you need institutional support to put something on like this, especially when you're a small college, where it really is all hands on deck. So Jerry, I want to give you the last word. Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much, John, and I'm so glad you acknowledge all the many people who make this happen, from the students to the volunteers, the faculty, the donors, but of course, in these types of speeches, there's always somebody who's left out, and I just want all of you to join me in thanking the director of our center, John Martins. It is such an honor to have all of you here. I think we span the globe in terms of perspectives that we try to bring here. We are a small cluster of colleges, the two colleges, but I really believe we punch above our weight. But we could not do that without all the people that make us who we are. We are not an institution, not a physical. We are really a community of ideas. But the thing, and what really resonated all the way through all of the talks, including the closing one, the thing that really gives us strength and power is hope and a deep belief in faith, and the faith that Pope Francis used to really celebrate, and that I miss already not having him here with us, but I know his influence, which is the dignity of the human person. And this is what we champion in our classrooms, and I think it's what, John, you and your team did championing through the conference, but also all of our speakers. So thank you so much for being here, for making us better, for you being here, and I wish you safe travels, and God bless.